I'll go first and let her clean up. I think when I think of her role in the public, I think of moments where I've actually seen her in the public space, interacting with people, and that for me has always been another layer of experience in terms of, first of all, how people reacted to her. And in the society, you all are amazing in facilitating that, and she loved you all so very much because, you know, she was in Paris and she was in New York. You know, she attended so many of the sessions, but seeing her interact with people and what she meant to them, what her person meant to the public, and also what her work meant to them. And there was often a lot of tears, and there was, you know, a lot of people really wanted to tell back to her the stories that she had so wonderfully told us. So for me, that's really one of the sort of important pillars of how I, to see, you know, as a writer too, to see like somebody's work become like living. It's like the living word. Like I think someone had said that about her. She was a living word. But to see that sort of walk among bodies was incredible.
Edwidge, before Imani jumps in, if you would just indulge me for a second. I'm not sure whether you're following the chat, but I have to share something with you based on your comment. It says, Edwidge, I was reading your book, The Art of Death, on the eve of Morrison's passing. I woke up and received the crushing news of her death the following day, and your book helped me process her death this year. So thank you too for your work. And then again, because we're doing multiple things, I don't know if you can see these. Then there's this comment from Tina Ansa that says, oh my, Imani and Edwidge Danticat on the same screen. So Imani, go ahead.
Yeah, so I would, I guess, begin by saying, to follow up what Edwidge said, is that in many ways, Edwidge has this same quality as Miss Morrison did, in that this sort of extraordinary quiet dignity and that is sort of filled with so much power. It's incredible. So it's, you know, so it's moving to see that replicated across generations. I will also say that I feel much more like a member of the public than someone who worked with Miss Morrison, because she had retired by the time I got to Princeton. And I also was always so overwhelmed when I was in her presence that I could barely speak, like just completely starstruck and just astonished to even be in sort of breathing distance. So now that said, you know, one of the things that I think about with respect to publics is that they were public. She interacted with publics plural. And one of the most sort of moving aspects of her work for me is that she spoke very directly to Black people. But of course, the work was available to the world and moved the world. And so what you got is this sort of cloud of witnesses among publics of Black intimacy, right? And interiority. And it's so often when we talk about sort of the aspiration for freedom or liberation for Black people, it's framed as a kind of appeal to the larger society. And the way that she fashioned the conversation, the public that witnessed her work, was not as an appeal, but a demand for an honest witnessing, right, to who we were fully. And I think that is, it's both an aspect of her moral witness, but also her absolute genius, right? That, you know, that one doesn't, because what it meant is that the position wasn't sort of an appeal looking up or an appeal proving our worth, but it was actually just a reckoning with the fullness of our humanity, right? And that to me is the sort of both the public and then the publics encased in that.
You know, I've been reading the last lectures, that book, and I started with sort of like the last and going back, and it was amazing to see, just as you're saying, Imani, how many times she was asked, like, you know, why don't you write about white people? Why don't, like, how, I mean, I've seen her, like people have asked in so many different languages, and as if they were trying to get her to commit what they saw as some kind of expansion of herself. But she was like, Black writer, we're here, you know, and it was always like over and over. I think that's also part of that intimacy that you're talking about, that it's just like, this is for all, like, this is for me, this is for us. And I think too, when she talked about how, but she was also so expensive in her reading and in her knowledge. And this one thing I always cling to, where she said, you know, Tolstoy didn't know he was writing for a little Black girl in Lorain, Ohio. And I think she also knew that you know, that she expanded into these spaces, and where she loved African writers and she read Caribbean writers. And there was this ongoing conversation about oppression and dangerous creation with like even Eastern European writers. So I think that also, there was an opening. It didn't feel, you know, we can get all of it that she meant for us in it, but it was expensive enough also. There was a door for other people, but she refused to be like, you know, like, I'm universal, which I thought was so powerful in her notion of the public as well.
So one of the things that we want to show has to do with her talking about art and social justice. And as Catherine's pulling that one up, I'll give you like a little setup for it, because I'm just can't wait to hear the response after you see the piece. It's Toni Morrison, Ta-Nehisi Coates, and Sonia Sanchez. And they are talking about, as I said, art and social justice at the Stella Adler Studio of Acting. And she essentially like shuts the house down. But the sentiment, which, you know, is quite common, but the sentiment is one that speaks to the important role of the artist. So if you can play that one for us, Catherine. It's relatively short, so we'll take a look at most of it, about 60 seconds of it.
I just want to leave you with this thought. I think the discussion we're having is about art and social policy. I want to remind us all that art is dangerous.
That's right.
I want to remind you of the history of artists who have been murdered, slaughtered, imprisoned, chopped up, refused entrance. The history of art, whether it's in music or written or what have you, has always been bloody, because dictators and people in office and people who want to control and deceive know exactly the people who will disturb their plans.
That's right.
And those people are artists. They're the ones that tell the truth.
Yeah, so what are you thinking, especially in this moment, the role of the artist?
I'm thinking amen, like I think someone just wrote in the chat, but it's certainly, you know, reinforced by what that wonderful Nation interview too, where she was saying this is the time when artists go to work. You know, there's no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. That is how civilizations heal. That's a constant call to action, I think, to artists, certainly this time more than ever.
I mean, and the piece about telling the truth is particularly urgent now, and especially dangerous, I think. And that's a national matter. It's also a global matter, right? The forces of fascism and militarism being what they are. I'm thinking also of the two clips together, because I think part of what is so powerful about her work and instructive for both artists and how we receive art is that there's both this incredible courage with truth telling and also contemplation, right? So it's not